So I just went to see the new film Nuremberg, and it made a really strong impression on me, and I really recommend that you go see it, and I'll tell you why. It's not just because of how it depicts the Nazi leadership and how they were put on trial and sentenced to death, but because of how clearly it exposes something that we don't talk about enough: the psychology of evil. The way evil doesn't present itself as evil. It actually presents itself as good. The way that it justifies itself, rationalizes itself, wraps itself in arguments and excuses until even intelligent people can be fooled. Seeing Russell Crowe as Hermann Goering is unsettling because he doesn't come across like a caricature. He's articulate, charismatic, logical. He talks about Germany being humiliated after Versailles, about other nations preparing for war, about needing to defend themselves. You watch him build this whole edifice of justification and it sounds almost reasonable until you listen closely. And then Michael Shannon as Justice Robert Jackson pushes him, and suddenly the whole thing collapses. Goering insists democracy no longer worked for Germany, which is why they now needed fascism. But then he claims that invading other countries was simply fulfilling the will of the people. It's a perfect example of how twisted moral logic collapses under pressure. You just have to dig a little bit, prod a little bit further, and the veil is lifted. For me, this is where Judaism has something incredibly deep to say. The Torah teaches us that the danger of evil isn't just the evil act itself, but the way evil can dress itself up as good. That's the meaning of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. After Adam and Eve ate from it, good and evil became mixed, blurred, confused. Evil doesn't just show up wearing a sign saying, "I'm evil." It comes disguised as logic, necessity, even compassion. I once heard a rabbi say that rationalize can be broken apart to read rational lies. And it comes as Goering is sitting there explaining why he had no choice. That's the world we live in, a world where evil can sound sophisticated. And the film really brings this home, particularly in the scenes between Goering and the US Army psychiatrist, Dr. Douglas Kelly, played by Rami Malek. Kelly is trying to understand the mind of a man who oversaw atrocities, and Goering tries the classic moral flattening. You Americans killed civilians in Hiroshima. People die in war. He wants to erase distinctions, to create moral confusion, to say there is no difference between genocide and wartime tragedy. And Kelly pushes back. There is a difference, he says, between intentionally trying to wipe out an entire people and civilian casualties as collateral damage in military conflict. Intent matters. Purpose matters. And it made a strong impression on me to see that in the film, and I felt whoever's producing this is clearly trying to make a strong message today. The idea that morality is not a grey blur where everything is equally bad, that there are degrees, there are intentions, and there are categories. And when people start blurring those things, well, that's how evil gets its way. That's how civilization collapses. When we see the attempt to compare the Jewish state defending itself against a genocidal terror government and organization with the intentional extermination carried out by the Nazis, that same intent. This film answers that confusion, and it reminds us exactly why those distinctions matter. And what also stood out is that the filmmakers clearly understand this moral world that Judaism introduced. They don't indulge in fashionable moral relativism. They don't present evil as misunderstood. They show it as it actually operates. Clever, persuasive, self-exonerating, but ultimately hollow when confronted with truth. And the film doesn't just show that on the side of the perpetrators, it shows it on the side of those who should have spoken out. There's this scene where the American character goes to the Pope to seek support for the trials, for a clear moral stand, and the Pope refuses. The American reminds him, the Pope wasn't silent in 1933 when they signed a treaty, a diplomatic treaty with Nazi Germany, lending it legitimacy effectively. He said you were effectively giving support to the Nazis there. Back then, you had something to say, but now when the Jews lie in ruins, you're suddenly quiet. And the Pope's justification is seemingly that his silence was needed at the time to protect Catholics, and at the same time now, it seemed like he didn't want to support the trials because he's saying somehow it's wrong to, I don't know, hang the Nazis, sentence them to death. It's a devastating moment because it exposes another face of moral failure. Not active evil, but cowardice dressed up as compassion. We mustn't speak too strongly. We mustn't take sides. We have to think of our own. It's the kind of reasoning that sounds pious, sounds merciful, but in practice abandons the victims. Judaism has a word for that too. Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, do not stand idly by your neighbour's blood. The Torah doesn't accept the idea that you can save your own conscience by being neutral in the face of evil. Silence can feel like mercy, but when people are being slaughtered, silence is complicity. And you know what's remarkable is that after a bit of digging, after the film, I found out that the Vatican's argument at the time, one of the arguments for opposing the trials, was that it would, a denazification would somehow radicalize the next generation of Germans, that holding Nazis accountable would somehow create new Nazis. And that is astonishing because it's exactly the same line we hear today about Israel fighting Hamas. Remember Piers Morgan and others saying it, confronting evil will just create more terrorists. Well, Judaism teaches the opposite. Refusing to confront evil doesn't prevent radicalization, it empowers it. That scene with the Pope is a brutal reminder that trying to stay above politics or protecting your own can actually mean abandoning your basic moral duty. So, watching Nuremberg, I felt it was less a historical drama and more a warning for all of us today. Evil doesn't rise because people look like villains. It rises because people sound convincing, because people rationalize, because people tell themselves stories about why what they're doing is justified or necessary or just unavoidable. That's exactly what the Torah warns about. The story of the Tree of Life is telling us, once good and evil get mixed together, once you can make evil sound moral, everything becomes dangerous. This film, in its quiet way, restores clarity. It peels back the layers of self-justification and forces you to see evil for what it is. And in a time when moral lines are being blurred everywhere, especially when it comes to the Jewish people and the state of Israel, a film that insists on moral clarity feels almost prophetic. And before I finish, I just want to say that this whole theme I've been discussing, the world looking away, the moral failure of bystanders, the rationalization of inaction, is exactly what we explore in our JTV Plus documentary about the Evian Conference. A story that not that many people know, but it's the story of how the world's leaders gathered in 1938 to discuss the Jewish refugee crisis and walked away doing almost nothing. Have a watch of our trailer, and if you want to watch the full thing, you can click the link in the video description. Imagine you're running for your life. Your home is no longer yours. Your neighbours spit at you in the streets. The government has branded you an enemy, stripped you of your rights, your livelihood, your humanity. You're a Jew in Nazi Germany, 1938, and the world knows your people are being crushed under Hitler's iron fist. You're desperate, clutching a suitcase with everything you own, praying for a visa, a ticket, a country, any country that will let you in. Now imagine this. The world's most powerful nations gather to decide your fate. 32 countries meeting in a lavish hotel by a serene lake with the power to save you, to save hundreds of thousands like you. And one by one, they say no. Welcome to JTV. I'm Ollie Annisfeld, and today we're diving into one of the most gut-wrenching, shameful chapters in modern history, the Evian Conference of 1938. This was the moment when the world had a chance to stand up, to open its doors, to save countless Jewish lives from Nazi persecution, and turned its back. This is a story of hope dangled and then snatched away, of sympathy that never became action, of a failure that paved the way for the Holocaust. We'll uncover every layer of what happened at Evian, why it unfolded the way it did, and the chilling warning it holds for us today. This is not just history, it's a mirror, forcing us to confront who we are when the world cries out for help. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.